Okay, so this is a test of Team Fortress. I don't even know what I'm gonna say. I need to turn this off. There's a
What is now left is to see the extent to which that now translates into higher voter turnout among young people. So what we have is plenty of potential energy. The question now for Nigeria's young people is if they are going to be able to convert that potential energy into the kinetic energy of votes, because that is the only language that is going to get you any change with regard to the political establishment.
In Tunisia, there's been a sudden and sharp tightening of the screws on critics of President Kais Saied. There's been a string of high-profile arrests. Johanna Hoos has been tracking the story.
Well, Mina, it's been nearly 2 years since President Saied put the brakes on what many thought was Tunisia's democratic success story since the 2011 Arab Spring. In 2021, Saied suddenly sacked the government that he was part of, decided to rule by decree, and rewrote the constitution. Now, institutional checks and balances, be they parliamentary or judicial, have been eroded, and this past month the pressure has intensified. The arrests of more than a dozen political figures, trade unionists, and media personnel represent a crackdown on dissent unlike anything since 2011. Many of the arrests were without warrants. People were dragged out of their homes, and some were even put on trial in military courts. Amongst those arrested is Noureddin Boutar, the head of Tunisia's largest private media outlet, Mosaic FM. According to his lawyer, Boutar has been questioned about his radio station's finances, as well as Mosaic's editorial line, which has shifted over the course of Saied's rule from optimism about his leadership to skepticism and criticism of his rule. Tunisian journalists took to the streets to protest Boutar's arrest, as well as state repression and attempts to intimidate the media. The president hit back.
هل تم حجب صحيفة واحدة أو تم منع برنامج واحد وهل تمت ملاحقة أي صحفي من أجل عمل يتعلق بالصحافة؟
What those in custody have been arrested for are offenses like abuse of power or assaulting state security, vague charges that critics say are trumped up and a ploy to shift the blame and deflect attention from the country's failing economy and public services.
Thanks, Joe. For 12 months, Russia's war on Ukraine has eclipsed virtually every other news story around the world. The ramifications of the conflict cannot be understated. Neither can the role of the media. This past year, we've covered brief sparks of dissent amidst severe restrictions imposed by Moscow, the unprecedented blocking of Russian media outlets across the Western world, the complexities of reporting the conflict. And now, a year since the invasion, we're taking a look at what the war has meant for Ukrainian media. For journalists there, this has been a time of immense risks, personal dilemmas, and shifting paradigms. Many became war reporters overnight. Some, in Russian-occupied territory, had to redraw editorial lines or just flee. All of them had to deal with the constraints of martial law. As Ukraine enters the second year of the war, we spoke with 3 Ukrainian journalists about what life and work is like in a country under siege.
I think the February 24th is the most difficult to go live and just talk to people. I understood that Russians were everywhere, that it was a really full-scale invasion, and people were terrified. I felt not just being an anchor, being a therapist, a psychologist, a military person.
Звуки дуже схожі на хлопки.
At that point, I couldn't differentiate the sound of air defense system and the sound of explosion, but I had to somehow explain what the sound we were hearing.
Одразу з технікою?
We decided to create a backup studio in a secret location. We had to spend very many nights at work in our underground parking because of the curfew, in our sleeping bags, and then wake up and go brush our teeth and get ready to work live for our audience. Many Ukrainian journalists were for the first time in their life in the situation when they do not just report on war, but they report on war in their own country.
Он ракета. Секундочку.
With their own relatives and friends and children being in danger. For me, the most difficult time was when my husband was a participant of this battle for Kiev. He was offline for 5 days, and actually I was very worried, but work distracted me. Our audience expects us to be calm and to be professional, but I also trust our audience because they don't always expect you to hold back your emotions. We now live in a very real world when real emotions, even when you're being a professional TV anchor, are acceptable. I feel like every day going through these challenges and hardships and very difficult hours staying in a bomb shelter, it's my contribution to one big victory that is absolutely going to happen to Ukraine. It's my biggest professional dream to announce that Ukraine has won and the war is over.
Перші 2 місяці ми просто гасили пожежі, які виникали всюди, і нам телефонували і писали люди вдень і вночі. Більшість із українських журналістів, особливо місцевих, вони не мали жодного досвіду роботи у зонах бойових дій. Мене звати Ліна Кущ, я перший секретар Національної спілки журналістів України. Ми займалися евакуацією, допомагали в евакуації і облаштуванні журналістів із зон бойових дій, із окупованих територій. У нас були дуже різноманітні запити із приводу безпеки, засобів захисту, із приводу безпечних шляхів евакуації. Ми шукали транспорт, ми шукали притулки, де могли б розселити журналістів. У нас був список, над яким ми працювали вдень і вночі, намагаючись дізнатися, хто і де перебуває. Кожна звістка про загибель колег, вона відгукувалася болем, тому що багатьох із тих, хто загинув торік, журналістів, я знала особисто. Понад 2000 українських журналістів залишили місце проживання, переїхали до інших регіонів України або за кордон. 30% українських медіа від лютого призупинили свою діяльність. Приблизно чверть українських журналістів сьогодні працюють без зарплати. Багато колег скаржаться на емоційне вигорання, на професійне вигорання, на те, що вже немає сил впоратися із тим потоком новин. Якщо війна йде у твоїй країні, дуже важко залишатися об'єктивним.
І вони знають, що...
Ми бачимо, що з боку українських журналістів присутня більша самоцензура. Майже цілий рік українські медіа, вони тримали якусь таку негласну домовленість, відмовляючись від якихось тем, які критикують владу. Рівень відповіді такий, що той, хто порушує такі незручні питання, вони працюють на Росію. Це зараз не час для того, щоб саме в такому тоні критикувати.
Sorry, last question will be from Ukrainian media.
Для українських журналістів критично важливо, щоб влада в Україні була підконтрольна, підзвітна і прозора. Українське суспільство, воно звикло до свободи слова, мабуть, як до повітря, яким дихаєш і не помічаєш цього.
Фотографія, як би ми не старались, вона не зупинить війну. Вона може привернути увагу і надати більше допомоги Україні. Мене звати Євген Малорядко, я український фотожурналіст. Працюю на війні з 2014 року. Дійсно, було страшно з перших днів, і ти не розумів, що відбувається.
Без паніки!
Коли ми побачили перші атаки, перші жертви, ми дійсно зрозуміли, що Маріуполь буде місцем, куди Росія стягне велику кількість військ. Ми розуміли, що тут важливо залишитись, бо якщо не буде журналістів, якщо не буде ніяких доказів, показати ці злочини буде нікому. Ти розумів з кожним днем, що місто вже майже оточено. Ми дуже часто перебували в лікарні і також ночували в станції швидкої допомоги. Ми, як і лікарі, як поліцейські, як інші там люди, які працюють в надзвичайних умовах, маємо і показувати, що відбувається. Якщо відбувається горе, то ми маємо документувати, ретельно обробляти. Ми теж цивільні особи, і коли ми бачимо, що за день прибуває така велика кількість пацієнтів з такою великою кількістю політравм, це точно не можна забути. Коли рятувальники несли Ірину Калініну, цю жінку на ношах, яка померла після, ми просто документували це, не думаючи про що ми маємо там сказати. Після публікації знімків з пологового будинку, так як матеріал розлетівся по всьому світу, а російська пропаганда, вона завжди намагається створити велику кількість маніпуляцій, і вони намагаються дискредитувати, чи фотографа, який це зняв, чи відеооператора. Я взагалі б хотів не мати цих фотографій в себе. Але, на жаль, я їх маю, я їх буду нести і показувати світу. Як і всіх українців, нас всіх війна дуже змінила. Вже не залишилось місця для сумнівів, що відбувається. Є таке вислів. Все не так однозначно. Після 24 лютого все зрозуміло, де чорне, де біле.
And finally, for those with a penchant for tech, AI, artificial intelligence, is the flavor of the month. It may even extend through the year. AI isn't new. What is, though, is a slew of hyper-advanced AI tools that are now available to the public. Take Prime Voice AI, created by US-based 11 Labs. Their voice cloning technology allows users to generate speech in the voice of any person, with just sample clips as input. It didn't take long for some users to put racist, homophobic, and misogynist words in the mouths of various celebrities. And 11 Labs has promised safeguards to prevent further abuse. Nevertheless, the AI might just work too well for its own good. Take 11 Labs' tech demo video, a speech given by Hollywood actor Leonardo DiCaprio back in 2014, revoiced with uncanny accuracy to sound like a range of celebrities. We leave you with that video, and we'll see you next time here at the Listening Post.
I stand before you not as an expert, but as a concerned citizen.
One of the 400,000 people who marched in the streets of New York on Sunday.
And the billions of others around the world who want to solve our climate crisis.
As an actor, I pretend for a living. I play fictitious characters, often solving fictitious problems.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if it were fiction.
As if pretending that climate change wasn't real would somehow make it go away. But I think we all know better than that now.
In Indonesia's fun fairs, more and more women are performing stunts that draw both crowds and criticism. 101 East meets the rebel bikers risking life and limb to chase their dreams. On Al Jazeera.
March on Al Jazeera. devastation and its aftermath, we have more on our continuing coverage of the earthquakes disaster in Turkey and Syria.
Gold Mafia. Al Jazeera Investigations goes undercover, infiltrating criminal networks to reveal how dirty cash is being turned into pure gold.
20 years on from the start of the Iraq War, we examine how the past 2 decades have shaped the country and the major challenges confronting future generations.
Documentaries that inspire. Witness brings world issues into focus through compelling human stories.
Stars gather for the 95th Oscars, celebrating the best in films from Hollywood and around the world.
March on Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera, wherever you are.
More deadly violence across the occupied West Bank. A Palestinian man is killed after 2 Israeli settlers are shot dead. Hello, I'm Darren Jordan. This is Al Jazeera, live from Doha. Also coming up, a migrant tragedy off Italy's coast. Dozens drown, including children, after their overloaded boat breaks up in rough seas. Plus,
1259.
Nigerians wait in hope as results begin to trickle in after a crucial presidential election marked by long delays. And we have the latest on the Russian advance towards the besieged Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. Two Israeli settlers have been shot dead in the occupied West Bank. Some settlers responded by burning down Palestinian homes. One Palestinian man was killed in the violence. Al Jazeera's Sarah Hayat reports now from West Jerusalem.
This is where the attack happened, in the town of Hawara in the occupied West Bank. 2 brothers from a nearby illegal Israeli settlement were shot while driving in a car. Israeli forces say they're looking for Palestinian suspects. Authorities immediately set up temporary checkpoints and closed existing ones in the area just south of Nablus.
Unfortunately, the terrorists continue to attack innocent Israelis. We will not be silent. We will do everything in our power to protect our citizens. We will make sure that Israelis will be able to live safely here in the land of Israel.
Shortly after the shooting, Israeli settlers in nearby areas burned down several Palestinian homes. Many have been injured since. Israel's new far-right government has approved the expansion of thousands of new illegal settler homes, it says, in response to this year's attacks. Sunday's shooting happened while a US brokered meeting was being held in Jordan between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, along with Egypt and Jordanian officials. It concluded with their commitment to de-escalating tensions by preserving the status quo at Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, and both sides stopping one-sided measures for several months, including Israel's building of new illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. But just hours later, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denied the freezing of any settlement construction. During Sunday's cabinet meeting, Israeli leaders promised to fast-track a bill that will allow the courts to impose the death penalty for offences including attacks on Israelis. One of many expedited measures being brought in by Israel's far-right government that is showing no sign of working towards a two-state solution with the Palestinians. Sarah Khairat, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
Well, Mustafa Barghouti is the Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative. He says Israeli settlers are behaving like armed gangs that have the backing of the Israeli government.
In the whole town of Hawara, we had at least 110 people injured so far. Some were stabbed, some were shot at, some were beaten, and several homes were burned. Fires are still going on around the city, around the town and inside it. It's a vicious fascist attack. The only way I can describe it is that this is the behavior of fascist gangs who are the Israeli settlers, protected and supported by the Israeli army. This is something we've never seen before. And it is clear now that the settlers themselves are sitting in the most important positions in the Israeli government, including Smotrich, who's a settler who has become now in charge of the West Bank and the Israeli army here, as well as Ben-Gvir, who has been classified before as a terrorist, and he is now the Minister of Internal Security in charge of police. So the fate of Palestinians are in the hands of illegal settlers. They're simply shooting and attacking people left and right. And they are loose completely. The Israeli army is doing nothing to stop them. And even after the meeting in Aqaba, all we hear now are statements from Netanyahu and the Prime Minister of Israel and others that they will not respect what was agreed upon.
Well, the US brokered talks in Jordan that Sarah mentioned in her report there have been opposed by several Palestinian factions. Hamas says the meeting will only help Israel to cover up its crimes in the occupied territories and will not change anything for the Palestinians.
We strongly condemn the Palestinian Authority's participation in the security meeting with the Zionist occupation in Aqaba. This meeting aims to curb the Intifada and the revolution of our Palestinian people in the West Bank and Jerusalem. This participation means that the security coordination between the occupation and the Palestinian Authority is very strong and is not suspended like the Authority announced. This meeting is against national unity and it represents only some powerful leadership in the Palestinian Authority. What is required is to hold a regional Arab summit to support our people and the resistance.
Al Jazeera's Nida Ibrahim explains why armed groups like Hamas are gaining popularity.
It's hard to miss growing Palestinian support for armed groups. The latest example was seen as thousands demonstrated across the occupied West Bank at midnight, responding to a call by the Lion's Den armed group. 11 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli raid on the city of Nablus on Wednesday. Some were fighters from the group. Palestine depends on international aid, and a large sum of the money it gets goes to the security forces. Most graduates from this military academy end up joining the ranks of Palestinian Authority security forces. Even when aid has fluctuated, support for the security establishment hasn't stopped. Critics say such heavy international investment in the security forces disempowers Palestinians, and many question coordination between the Palestinian Authority and Israel on security.
Nearly 30% of international aid to the Palestinian Authority goes towards security. When the Palestinian Authority was established, the main goal of international aid was to keep the peace process going. But this has changed over the years, and many say that the goal now is to ensure stability.
While many world leaders are calling for de-escalation and tension, Palestinians say they're missing the obvious problem: Israel's military occupation. And without addressing that, they say any other discussions will only prolong it. Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera, the occupied West Bank.
Senior Arab politicians have held meetings with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Damascus. The talks are aimed at bringing Syria back into the Arab League. Syria was suspended from the group in 2011 after Assad conducted a crackdown on mass protests against his rule. This quickly descended into civil war. Moves to end Syria's international isolation have intensified since it was hit by earthquakes earlier this month. At least 59 migrants, including 12 children, have died in a shipwreck off the coast of southern Italy. More than 80 people have been rescued. Officials say the boat was traveling to Italy from Turkey. Those on board were trying to reach Europe through the Mediterranean. Nadim Baba reports.
The aftermath of a tragedy as they retrieve the dead. This video shows some of the dozens of bodies which washed up on the eastern coast of Calabria. And this is what remains of the boat they were on. More bodies were spotted at sea. The Coast Guards continued looking for survivors on Sunday. It was night time when the vessel foundered during rough weather on a rocky reef near the resort of Steccato di Cutro. It was reportedly carrying as many as 150 people. Many of them were from Afghanistan. Among the dead, women and children, including at least one baby. Scores of people have been rescued. They're being treated for physical injuries and trauma. In his weekly address in Vatican City, Pope Francis spoke about the victims.
I pray for each of them, for the missing and for the other migrants who survived. I thank those who are helping them and giving them assistance. May the Virgin Mary help these brothers and sisters.
Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, says she's deeply saddened, adding that EU nations must, quote, redouble our efforts to coordinate on migration and asylum. Critics say suggestions for a common asylum system and legal migration routes have gone nowhere for years. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has expressed her deep sorrow for the deaths, blaming human traffickers and promising to block migrant sea departures to prevent more disasters. Charities involved in sea rescues say that may be wishful thinking.
People, and when we say people, is not only men, it's women and children, and this tragedy recalls that again, because children apparently sadly died today. People depart, no question of will they be rescued or not.
The United Nations has recorded more than 17,000 deaths and disappearances in the central Mediterranean since 2014. In the absence of Europe-wide cooperation, it's likely more will lose their lives trying to reach the shores of Italy. Nadeem Barber, Al Jazeera.
Well, Caroline Williman is from Doctors Without Borders. She says governments are making it more difficult for rights groups to carry out rescue missions.
What we know is that over the last few months, Italian authorities are again making the work of civilian search and rescue operators like ourselves more difficult. So our ship is detained at this very moment. NGO ships who rescue people are being sent to ports that are very far away from the search and rescue zone, that are on the northern coast of Italy. So we sail many days with people on board to disembark them there and to sail back. At the same time, we also know that the vast majority of people who reach Italy tend to reach the country either independently or be rescued by the Italian Coast Guard. So the number of people actually arriving with the help of NGOs is a minority. But as unfortunately has been the case already for many years, there is the campaign against the work that we do, and that today has been shown again how very needed it is. Unfortunately, it continues to make our work more difficult, and the people who pay the price are the people who cannot be rescued by us. I can only say that having worked on a search and rescue vessel for almost a year, for having worked several years in camps in Greece where people arrive, I have never met anyone who made that journey if they would have seen another option. So people will continue to take these extremely dangerous journeys. This is the reality that we face.
The results of Nigeria's presidential election are beginning to trickle in. Ballots are being counted in what's become the tightest race in decades. Voting was extended by an entire day in parts of one province after people in polling stations faced long delays. Harry Matassa reports from Enugu in the southeast.
There is cautious optimism across Nigeria as people wait for the final official election results. Voting took place in a few parts of the country on Sunday, where technical glitches and isolated cases of violence disrupted polls the day before. Some of those who voted hope results will be announced soon.
We should be able to get the tools to make election free, fair and faster, so that everybody, somebody like me, can have 100% trust in it and faith in it that it's going to reflect our will for a betterment of our society.
Nigeria's election process was marked by a late start here in Enugu in the southeast and other regions. 18 presidential candidates want to lead Africa's most populous nation, but only 3 are seen as having any chances of winning. Bola Tinubu of the governing All Progressives Congress, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar of the main opposition People's Democratic Party, and former Anambra State Governor Peter Obi of the smaller Labour Party.
Whoever wins the presidency will have a lot of challenges to deal with, turning around a struggling economy, attacks by armed groups in some regions, cash shortages, as well as the high cost of living.
Nigerians also voted for parliamentarians to represent them for the next 4 years.
If these elections don't go well, you have a situation where we become the burden for other nations. We become a destination for aid, a destination for help, rather than play our part in joining to contribute in development.
Nigeria is also struggling with the separatist movement, kidnappings for ransom, conflict between herders and farmers, corruption, poverty and unemployment. Issues people here want addressed urgently. Harun Matasa, Al Jazeera, Enugu, Nigeria.
And a group of armed men in Nigeria stormed a vote-counting centre, posing as election officials in the city of Lagos. They attacked party agents with knives and sticks, but were soon overpowered by soldiers. There were isolated incidents of violence during Sunday's vote, though not on the scale seen in previous elections. UK and EU leaders will hold talks in London in the coming hours to finalise a new deal for Northern Ireland's post-Brexit trading arrangements. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will discuss the Northern Ireland Protocol. It requires the region to follow some EU laws so that goods can flow freely into the Republic of Ireland without checks. But some Northern Ireland political groups say this undermines the region's connection to the rest of the UK. Russian forces are continuing their advance in eastern Ukraine. The Moscow-backed Wagner mercenary group says its fighters have captured the village of Yahidne, that's north of Bakhmut. Fighting has been focused around the city for weeks. Osama bin Javaid reports now from the Russian capital.
A town in ruins. Volleys of gunfire becoming closer to the center of Bakhmut. Fighters from Russia's Wagner group say they've stepped up their attacks from the north and the south of the town. A win here is more symbolic than strategic for Russian forces who've been fighting for months.
Assault units of Wagner completely captured the village of Yahidne in the north of Bakhmut.
As Russian forces take more positions and slowly move deeper into eastern Ukraine, Western powers have imposed more sanctions. In a move to zero in on those who've helped Russia to withstand sanctions, the European Union has brought in its 10th round of sanctions, which target 87 individuals and 34 commercial and legal entities. That's in addition to the latest US export restrictions and sanctions. For Russia, the conflict has become an existential issue.
When all leading NATO countries have declared their aim to inflict a strategic defeat on us, how can we not consider their nuclear capabilities under these circumstances? They have one goal: to divide the former Soviet Union and the Russian Federation. And then, maybe, they will accept us into the so-called family of civilized nations, but only separately, piece by piece.
Previous rounds of sanctions against Moscow have not achieved the desired results, as Russia has been able to find new allies and markets. And as the rhetoric from both sides of the conflict gets more intense, peace becomes an ever-distant possibility. Osama bin Javaid, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
Time for a short break here in Al Jazeera. When we come back, we'll tell you why people in Mexico are angry with their government's proposed election reforms. And a look at the spillover of war into Yemen's once thriving coffee industry. More on that. Stay with us.
Hello, there's a possibility of some rain in the forecast around the Gulf over the next couple of days. A little more cloud just flirting with us here. Even here in Qatar, you might just see a spot or two of rain, but I suspect wetter weather will be a little further north, northeastern parts of Saudi Arabia, through Kuwait, and across the other side of the Gulf. Some showers there just easing, pumping up a little bit as they go across a good part of Iran. Maybe a little bit of snow over the high ground. Further north, it's generally dry. Up towards the Levant, Syria generally dry, temperatures starting to pick up now, and a similar picture too across a good part of Turkey. Temperatures picking up across the northeast of Africa, 27 Celsius in Cairo and rising. Keen southerly wind across this side of the continent, just pushing up into the Mediterranean, that Sirocco wind. One or two showers there just around the northwest of Africa, and a few showers just around the Gulf Coast. Now, heavy showers continue to be a problem just around Mozambique at present. This massive cloud contains what is the remnants of tropical cyclone Freddy. That's pushing some big downpours in across central and southern parts of Mozambique, into Eswatini, into KwaZulu-Natal. Some wet weather there lingering across Zimbabwe, and more of the same all the way into midweek.
In Indonesia's fun fairs, more and more women are performing stunts that draw both crowds and criticism. 101 East meets the rebel bikers risking life and limb to chase their dreams. On Al Jazeera.
Informed opinions.
Far-right extremism is real and needs to be tackled as soon as possible.
Frank assessments.
There was a joke about the interim government, that it's not interim, nor does it govern.
Inside Story on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. A quick reminder of the top stories here this hour. A Palestinian man has been killed and some Palestinian homes torched in another day of violence in the occupied West Bank. The latest flare-up happened in the town of Hawara. Well, it followed the killing of 2 Israeli settlers. Israeli forces say they're searching for Palestinian suspects. Additional troops have been deployed and security checks have been stepped up. At least 59 migrants have died in a shipwreck off the coast of southern Italy. 12 children are among the dead. Officials say the boat travelled to Italy from Turkey. Those on board are trying to reach Europe through the Mediterranean. Turkey has stepped up efforts to clear away the mountains of rubble 3 weeks after the earthquakes. Equipment's been sent to the affected areas as there are concerns about people's health. Al Jazeera's Teresa Burr reports from Kahramanmaraş.
Rubble, dust and loss are everywhere in southeastern Turkey these days. In Kahramanmaraş, authorities have already started to clear the rubble. But Nermin says she cannot forget what she has lost and comes here every day where her home once stood.
We removed my mother and father from the rubble. Only my father was alive. Every day I come to the same place to see if I can find their belongings, just to have a memory.
Clearing away the mountains of rubble is a daunting task because it is everywhere in this part of the country.
Trucks have unloaded tons of rubble all around this area, creating these mountains that you can see right behind me. Removing the debris from the center of the city is a huge challenge. According to the United Nations, the volume of the rubble that needs to be removed, if all put together, would cover an area of around 100 square kilometers.
Or over 18,000 football fields. The Turkish government says the rubble will be removed and processed without harming the environment and the people. But environmental groups have expressed fears about possible contamination. There is also health concerns about the presence of asbestos, a mineral that could cause cancer, which was permitted to use in Turkey until 2014. This map shows that asbestos was detected in the areas affected by the earthquakes. In the city of Hassa, patients are showing up non-stop at this field hospital set up by the Indonesian government. Many are coming for regular checkups, but others with respiratory difficulties. Dr. Corona Rintawan says the cleanup process is crucial to prevent disease.
People must be covered by, must be given the mask. If there's a community surrounding the rumble, before they start to clean the rumble. The cleaning of the rumble makes the dust affect the people, primarily of the respiratory problem.
Turkey is struggling to cope with the scale of the disaster caused by the earthquakes. Removing the rubble is only the first step of the likely many challenges ahead. Teresa Burr, Al Jazeera, Kahramanmaraş, Turkey.
Syria's civil defense group, the White Helmets, are warning of the growing threat of cholera in rebel-held areas as a result of the earthquakes. The group says the damage to infrastructure and sanitation has been massive, and there could be a real catastrophe. The CIA director, William Burns, says the US believes Iranian leaders are not pursuing a nuclear weaponization program at the moment. Last week, the UN's nuclear watchdog said Tehran had enriched uranium to near military-grade level.
Have Iran's leaders made the decision to pursue a nuclear weapon?
To the best of our knowledge, we don't believe that the supreme leader in Iran has yet made a decision to resume the weaponization program that we judged that they suspended or stopped at the end of 2003.
Thousands of people have gathered in cities across Mexico to protest against the government's plans to cut the budget of the country's election watchdog. Opponents say the changes threaten democracy, an accusation the president vigorously denies. Al Jazeera's Manuel Rapala reports from Mexico City.
A massive demonstration in Mexico City. The discontent is directed toward Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's recent overhaul of the country's independent electoral authority, or INE.
We're here to defend the INE so that it's not modified.
They want us to return to the days when the electoral system was controlled by the government.
We do not want the INE to be cancelled or modified. We want it to continue so there can be democratic progress in Mexico.
Last week, Congress approved a set of sweeping reforms to the INE. Critics say these changes severely cut the agency's budget and also limit its autonomy, restricting the INE's ability to hold political candidates who break electoral laws accountable.
Political experts say that these reforms to the National Electoral Institute represent an erosion of democracy in Mexico, arguing that it was this electoral body that helped to end decades of single-party rule in Mexico and helped to usher in a new era of democracy for the country in the 21st century.
For his part, President López Obrador insists the reforms to the INE are aimed at cutting costs and increasing transparency. He's also accused the agency of being corrupt and favoring his political opponents.
The INE is one of the costliest electoral organizations in the world, and also one of the most anti-democratic.
Though national elections in Mexico are still a year away and Mexican presidents are only allowed to serve a single 6-year term, activists say future elections in the country now run the risk of being marred by distrust and corruption, as they were in the years before the creation of the National Electoral Institute. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Mexico City.
An explosion at a crowded market has killed at least 5 people in southwestern Pakistan. It's unclear who was behind the attack in Barkan in Baluchistan province. Police say a bomb placed on a motorcycle was detonated by remote control. At least 16 others have been injured. In Papua New Guinea, an Australian archaeologist and 2 local researchers that were held for a week by an armed group have been released. They were on a field trip in a remote village when they were kidnapped earlier in February. Officials admit a ransom was paid, though they say it was less than what the captors had demanded. The kidnappers fled into the bush after the handover. Some sports news now, and Manchester United have won the first trophy of the English domestic season. They beat Newcastle 2-0 to win the League Cup. Casemiro headed United on their way to a first title win since 2017. And a deflected shot from Marcus Rashford put his team 2-up at London's Wembley Stadium.
This cup can be the inspiration to give even more and to be even more collective, to be even more in togetherness and to put even more effort in to be better.
Now, farmers in Yemen are hoping to revive their once booming coffee industry. The nation was the first in the world to commercially grow and export the plant, but after 8 years of war, production has plunged, as Victoria Gatenby now reports.
Yemen, the cradle of the global coffee trade. These mountains in Sana'a province were once carpeted with coffee trees. A civil war that started in 2014 made exports nearly impossible, so coffee was replaced by the mild narcotic cat, which is easier to farm. But with hopes of a new UN-brokered truce being agreed, farmers want to reverse the decline.
We are uprooting cat trees and planting coffee because the coffee business has flourished over the past few years. We're returning to our roots, to the origins of our ancestors.
Coffee originated in Ethiopia but was first commercially cultivated around the Yemeni port of Mocha during the 15th century. That legacy lives on, not just in the name of the Mocha coffee variety, but also in an entire species. Nearly 3/4 of all coffee grown is from Arabica beans.
Yemen has the greatest genetic diversity of coffee in the world. We are yet to fully count all the species. So far, we have recorded 44 genetic compositions, strains or varieties. Is it all that Yemen has got? No, Yemen is very rich. We still haven't reached many areas.
Coffee was once Yemen's biggest cash crop. Output has fallen so dramatically that it's no longer considered a leading coffee exporter. But many here are optimistic about the future.
This area in the Haraz region is considered one of the best for growing coffee. Some of the winning samples in the 2022 National Coffee Auction were from this region.
Coffee is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but Yemen is missing out. Farmers here hope things will turn around, not just for profits, but also a shot at preserving their most ancient of crops and a proud heritage. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
Now, have you ever fancied a latte with a lizard or a snack with a snake? Well, I don't, but a cafe in Malaysia's capital, Kuala Lumpur, is giving customers a rare chance to get up close with a wide array of reptiles. Diners can watch the animals from the comfort of their tables, while the more daring can get hands-on with the cold-blooded creatures. The cafe's owner says he wants to show people the more lovable side of the often maligned animals. Time for a quick check of the headlines here on Al Jazeera. A Palestinian man has been killed and some Palestinian homes torched in another day of violence in the occupied West Bank. The latest flare-up happened in the town of Hawara. Well, it followed the killing of 2 Israeli settlers. Israeli forces say they're searching for Palestinian suspects. Earlier on Sunday, officials from Israel and the Palestinian Authority held talks in Jordan and agreed to de-escalate tensions. But those discussions have been opposed by several Palestinian factions, including Hamas.
We strongly condemn the Palestinian Authority's participation in the security meeting with the Zionist occupation in Aqaba. This meeting aims to curb the Intifada and the revolution of our Palestinian people in the West Bank and Jerusalem. This participation means that the security coordination between the occupation and the Palestinian Authority is very strong and is not suspended like the authority announced. This meeting is against national unity and it represents only some powerful leadership in the Palestinian Authority. What is required is to hold a regional Arab summit to support our people and the resistance.
At least 59 migrants have died in a shipwreck off the coast of southern Italy. They include 12 children. Officials say the boat travelled to Italy from Turkey. More than 80 migrants have been rescued. In Nigeria, ballots are being counted after Saturday's presidential and parliamentary elections, the tightest in decades. Some areas in one province extended voting until Sunday after long delays. Thousands of people have gathered in cities across Mexico to protest against the government's plans to cut the budget of the election watchdog. Opponents say the changes threaten democracy, an accusation the president vigorously denies. UK and EU leaders will hold talks in London in the coming hours to finalise a new deal for Northern Ireland's post-Brexit trading arrangements. At the moment, the region follows some EU laws so that goods can flow freely into the Republic without checks. But some Northern Ireland political groups say this undermines the region's connection to the rest of the UK. Those were the headlines. The news continues here in Al Jazeera after 101 East. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Trump fought the law, but will the law win? With neither side willing to negotiate, is the Ukraine war becoming a forever war? Is America's global leadership increasingly fragile? What will U.S. politics look like as we head to the presidential elections of 2024?
A quizzical look at U.S. politics. The bottom line.
In Indonesia's fun fairs, some bright new female daredevils are dazzling audiences.
Kalau Mila waktu main itu kayak ngerasa seneng bangga sama diri sendiri gitu.
But riding in the Devil's Barrel is a dangerous business.
Ini udah hamil dia, hamil 1,5 bulan pernah jatuh dari tong, sempat pingsan.
In a patriarchal and religious society, these women are seen as rebels.
Karena begini dia, kita ini kan perempuan itu harus di rumah.
Saya pengen biar orang ngira kalau biar cewek tuh bisa seperti cowok, biar cewek tuh nggak diremehkan gitu misalkan.
101 East follows the female daredevils, chasing their dreams in Indonesia's so-called Wall of Death. In Tarkenong, a town on the Indonesian island of Sumatra, 23-year-old Devi is getting ready to perform.
Mama kerja boleh? Cas dulu mama. Iya mama naik kereta boleh? Mana? Ini yang itu pink.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, many fun fairs across the country had to close. Tonight, Devi is performing for the first time after a long break.
Dan ini kan mungkin setelah 6 bulan nggak main tongsten lagi, ini mungkin hari pertama dan mungkin untuk beberapa hari ke depan mungkin agak jantungan dikit sih. Oke.
Devi has been performing in the Tong Setan or Devil's Barrel since 2017. There are an estimated 20 such female performers in Indonesia. Riders speed around the walls without protective gear.
Tentunya kayak rindu aja bawa motor seperti ini.
These shows are the main attractions of the travelling fun fairs. Up to 4 riders perform at the same time.
Kalau Scorpio dia megangnya harus kuat biasa, nggak bisa sembarang megang ya. Terus harus pakai tenaga dia kan.
1,500 kilometres away on the southern tip of Sumatra Island, 20-year-old Tessa is trying to improve her riding skills. After 4 years of performing in the Devil's Barrel, she wants to challenge herself with new tricks. Today, she's learning a position called the Scorpio.
Cari posisi kaki kanannya. Ini kuat nih. Gini-gini motor di atas tuh. Oh. Gini-gini dia. Iya. Nah, coba abang.
Tessa's instructor demonstrates the Scorpio position for her.
Kenapa nggak?
Iya.
Ada coba.
Aku coba.
Ya.
Oke. Kalau misalnya nggak bisa,
Nanti abang nanti kalau dia turun tuh.
apa?
Tessa struggles with the new move.
Gimana? Susah.
Susah. Ini gimana?
Susah banget enggak?
Susah banget.
Kalau bahaya sih Bu, cuman gimana ya? Cowok pun nggak semua cowok bisa gitu. Emang harus betul ada tenaga, otot lah Bu intinya kan. mental lah. Kalau cewek ini 100% nggak bisa. Kalau cewek, tapi kalau cowok insya Allah bisa.
Tessa knows all too well the challenges of riding in the barrels.
Tessa harus melatih pusing, soalnya kan kalau kantong setan itu kan muter-muter, otomatis kalau nggak kebiasaan pusing. Kita harus kencang baru bisa naik ke atas. Kalau pelan kita bakalan jatuh.
But she's determined to keep going.
Bermain motor tuh kebanyakan kan laki-laki. Jadi Tessa sebagai cewek mau menunjukkan kalau cewek tuh bisa juga seperti laki-laki.
"23-year-old Camilla Romuliani Purba has spent almost a decade in this male-dominated industry.
Emang dunianya para laki-laki gitu. Kalau Mila beradaptasi ke dunia pria ini memakan waktu berapa bulan sih. Kalau joki-joki tongstan yang sama Mila kemarin itu, Mila udah nganggap mereka itu bukan sebagai rekan kerja lagi, bukan sebagai teman. Tapi Mila lebih menganggap mereka itu seperti keluarga Mila sendiri, seperti abang bagi Mila di pasar malam.
Known as Princess Tong Setan, Camilla is one of the most famous female Devil's Barrel riders in Indonesia.
Setelah dari tahun 2014 Mila mulai dari joki tongstan, memang Mila yang pertama kali di Indonesia. Kadang kayak ngerasa canggung, malu juga. Kadang mereka tuh kayak teriak nanti tengah jalan, kakak Carmilla Purba yang joki tongsetan. Pasti ada seneng juga, oh berarti sekarang akunya udah mulai dikenal orang.
Camilla regularly shares glimpses of her daily life with her followers on social media.
Kami lagi main di Bogor, pasar malamnya. Halo. Followers Mila ya kalau di Instagram itu 23.000, kalau di Facebook itu ada sekitaran 26 ribuan. Oh, boleh dong main-main ke situ, pasti kan kayak gitu. Jadinya kita lebih ke promosinya itu emang ke Facebook ataupun Instagram gitu. Jadi orang-orang pada tahu kalau Mila main di mana sekarang.
As night falls, a crowd gathers to see the fair's main attraction.
Karena kan cewek ngenentong setannya tuh keren ya, ditambah buat apa sih ngendain di jalan biasa aja susah, pasti keren sih.
For manager Claudette, having Camilla join the team has been a blessing.
Pertamanya ceritanya pembalap saya ada satu, laki-laki bernama Arya. Selama 2 bulan saya tidak ada pendapatan atau tongsetan itu sepi. Dan saya berpikir, dan saya juga berteman lama dengan Carmilla, dan saya berpikir sangat-sangat ramai setelah seorang wanita bernama Carmilla menjadi peran di joki tongsetan ini.
Before the riders perform, Claudette checks the walls of the Devil's Barrel to make sure they're safe.
Kalau seberapa bahaya itu sangat bahaya. Itu kemungkinan besar itu beresiko patah tulang dan beresiko kehilangan nyawa. Kalau kejadian dulu pernah, hampir 1 bulan yang lalu diakibatkan dinding basah dan pembalap laki-laki itu terjatuh dan kakinya pun tergilir. Ya kalau sebelum balapan itu kadang saya merasa deg-degan dan di pikiran saya pun selalu ada rasa trauma.
Carmilla well aware of the dangers.
Kalau Mila ngelihat langsung di depan Mila kalau joki lain itu jatuh, ya pasti pada saat itu pasti takut. Cuman kan balik lagi, ya emang ini udah risiko kita sebagai pekerja joki tong setan gitu.
It's time for her to step into the spotlight.
Ya itu emang sesuatu yang Mila damba-dambakan, kayak seneng banget gitu Mila bisa menaklukkan motor tong setan itu. Kalau motor tong setan itu bagi Mila itu udah kayak nyawa Mila sendiri.
After the show, Camilla collects money from the audience.
Kalau saweran itu dapatnya itu sih tergantung dari pengunjung. Kadang juga kita dapatnya itu kalau lagi sepi, kadang cuma dapat 100 atau 200, itu juga dibagi ke pembalap lain gitu. Jadi kalau masalah gaji juga, itu juga tergantung dari pengunjung. Kalau dari gaji, kemungkinan kalau rame-ramenya gitu satu bulan itu 8 atau 9 juta gitu sebulan.
For some women riders, juggling work and family life is difficult.
Saya manja sekali jadinya.
Debbie's feeling torn between being a mother and a rider.
Dan itu juga memberatkan sekarang posisi Devi, harus terus jadi joki atau tetap di rumah sama anak-anak gitu. Itu masih jadi pertimbangan sama Devi sendiri. Ini udah hamil dia, hamil 1,5 bulan, pernah jatuh dari tong, sempat pingsan. Tapi alhamdulillah dia nggak apa-apa, masih umur 1,5 bulan gitu. Terus berkelanjut sampai hamil kakaknya ini 7 bulan. Yang mengkritik pekerjaan Devi juga banyak ya, mau itu dari teman sekolah Devi dulu, mau itu dari pihak keluarga, ataupun teman-teman yang kenal di sosmed. Tetapi itu sebenarnya mempengaruhi mental Devi sebagai joki gitu. Itu Devi mikir gini, kenapa sih mereka nggak ngedukung, nggak selalu ngedukung, kenapa sih semuanya nggak sepenuhnya mendukung, kenapa masih ada yang nggak suka gitu.
One of those critics is her uncle, Uda. Devi and her family live in Aceh, the only province in Indonesia where Sharia law is officially practiced.
Mulai berlakunya syariat Islam masuk ke Aceh ini, kalau dampaknya yang saya lihat ada perubahan betul, jelas, sangat jelas. Karena masyarakat sudah mulai memakai jilbab, tidak ada berdua-duaan, pemuda-pemudinya sudah mulai sopan pakaiannya.